Thanks for joining this webinar. This is about my sixth webinar that I've hosted for the organization. And our goal, our mission is to provide, protect, preserve, and promote hiking opportunities in Pennsylvania. And this webinar series that we've been doing once a month is a goal to do just that. And what a better way to talk about hiking than to talk about hiking with our best friends. So tonight I'm joined by two awesome colleagues that I've gotten to know and work with, whose mission I think all of you will really admire and come to learn a little bit more, hopefully, about their work within the animal world as well as conservation and Pennsylvania. So tonight I am so happy to be joined by Kristen Tullo, the state director for the now Humane World for Animals. So Kristen will be kicking things off, and then we'll be passing things off to Dr. Melissa Resnick. She is a Philly resident and a vet of over 20 years, and she is now a professor for shelter medicine and community engagement. So we're in very great company. I know you're a dog owner, you're a dog lover, and you think you're prepared and you think you are ready to hit the trail, but I've seen one or two mishaps, and I hope that tonight we all can learn something and help to continue the passion of exploring with our animals. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Kristen, if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
So in kind of the lay of the land, guys, so what we're going to just do pretty casual presentations. Hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions along the way, go ahead and just like drop them in the chat. I'll try to monitor that. At the end, we will open it up for some dialogue and some questions if you have any. But I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen for Kristen's presentation.
Well, it is such an honor to be here. I'm a huge fan of Keystone Trails Association, and also Haley has been just amazing to work with in putting this webinar series together. So we're really excited to announce, I wore my new logo shirt actually. We are now Humane World for Animals, formerly known as the Humane Society of the United States. And so while we have a new name and an updated look, we still have the same powerful mission to end animal cruelty. And my role is to focus on protecting animals through strong community coalitions. So partnerships like we have with you all and impactful legislation. So we're very fortunate to have Dr. Resnick with us today. You know, Haley had mentioned her 20 plus years experience, and she has always hiked with her dogs. And when we were preparing for this presentation, she was just so excited sharing the impact that her own companion animal has had on her. And so I'm looking forward to hearing those stories today. So on the next slide, I'm just going to quickly cover the agenda. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the laws and some legislation that is pending that you all may be interested in. And then Dr. Resnick will talk about the safety tips for hiking with your pets. And then we'll wrap up together with some resources for everyone. And then it'll be your turn. So, you know, feel free to ask questions and pop them in the chat. We can have open dialogue at the end of this presentation. We've left time to just chat. So on the next slide, I'm really proud to tell everyone on this call that we have risen in Pennsylvania in the ranks of humane states with the passing and enforcement of groundbreaking animal protection measures. So you all may be familiar with the passage of Libre's Law in 2017, which was a much needed improvement to the animal cruelty code, and it made national headlines. But our work does continue, and with families visiting parks and people getting ready to hike more with spring and summer, whether for entertainment or exercise, there are tips that can help keep our furry friends and our fellow outdoor enthusiasts safe as we enjoy the outdoors together. So whether going for a hike, drive, or even hanging out in your backyard, there are some precautions that we can be out on the lookout for during our adventure. So the first tip that from a legislative side that I wanted to let you know about is I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but never leave your pet in a parked car, not for 1 minute, not with the car running and the air conditioner on. I know that Dr. Resnick could, validate that on warm days, the temperatures inside a vehicle can rise to dangerous levels, and your pet can suffer from irreversible damage. And so that is something to be on the lookout for while you are out adventuring. In 2018, we did pass a bill that you may recognize as the hot car law, and it was signed into law to protect pets from distress who may be in a motor vehicle. So this bill allows, well, this law allows a public safety professional to remove a pet if they are unattended in a vehicle. And I think that a lot of us tend to associate this type of bill with warm weather, but I did want to mention that it is all temperatures. So this is year round, and there are very dangerous situations that can occur from cold temperatures as well. You're looking at issues with dehydration due to a lack of water, or even something like collar or leash entanglement while they're in the vehicle. So anyone who witnesses animals in distress, you would want to call 911. So that is my first tip from a legislative side. I also wanted to make note that Pennsylvania's law does not include a Good Samaritan provision. This is important to mention because time is of the essence. So making sure that you put that call into 911 as quickly as possible is the crucial action that's needed to save the pet's life. I will pause there and see if there's any questions related to that law. I think it might be a good time to pause. It was a lot of information. And one other point I do want to make, if possible, staying with the vehicle until the authorities arrive, that's going to be an important point as well. And making sure that you're writing down the date and the time that you noticed the pet in the car, and making sure that if the owner were to appear before the authorities get there, it's really better not to confront. And so just making sure that you let the authorities know all of the information that you have so that they can conduct their follow-up investigation. So that's the overview of the hot car law. No questions so far. Okay. The next important piece of information I thought you all may be interested in knowing is that our state does have an anti-tethering law. And for clarification purposes, the term tethering or chaining a dog to a fixed object. And so I think with this law, a lot of people tend to think in relation of cold temperatures, but this is also another one that it's just as crucial to be diligent in heat. Hot temperatures and pavement are just as dangerous and can result in physical injury to the pet. Heat stroke, there was a terrible case in Franklin County that was really the case that led to this statewide law, and it was during hot temperatures. So Pennsylvania's law does protect pets who are in from being tethered in extreme temperatures. There is also stipulation around how long a pet could be chained as a means of confinement. And so that is a big step in the right direction. I am going to talk about some flaws with the law in just a second as well, but also making sure that that citizens are checking with their local municipalities, because there are a lot of parts of our state, Harrisburg, York, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and some other areas that do have more stringent, stricter regulations that apply during extreme weather. And so just making sure that you know for your own municipality, so that if you're out and about on the trails and you saw something like that, you would know what to do. I think that the other point to be made with this, beyond I guess kind of a flaw, what's challenging about the law is that while that was a step in the right direction and this was a part of Libre's law, The challenge is that dogs can still be kept outside untethered. And so there is an inclement weather bill that we are trying to work on in Pennsylvania. And that would have stipulations around suitable housing for pets. I think a lot of times right now, an officer might be called out to a situation and they really are within the confinements of the law. And so this law would, again, talk about requiring shelters to have raised, moisture proof, windproof structures, making sure that there's a roof that would prevent any kind of weather from entering inside the housing. And so, again, a step in the right direction, but this is something that I would say really is a top priority for our state, and making sure that our law enforcement officers are able to respond to these calls and get the pets the help that they need. So one positive outcome, I wanted to share a quick story, because I think we all know a lot of these challenging stories with pets, but we have witnessed some really positive change with the law. There is a dog that his name was Titus, and he was brought to Senior Dog Haven and Hospice at 15 years old. And he had spent it actually makes me fill up with tears when I think about this, because we met him at our lobby day, and he spent 15 years at the end of a chain. And Titus was adopted into a loving home where he spent the last few months of his life. But I do share this because if you were to run into a situation with a pet that while you're hiking or this is something that you would also want to call law enforcement out to investigate a wellness check. Since this law puts reasonable limitations on keeping a dog outside. In any kind of weather. So I think aside from the law, just apply that adage: if it's too hot or too cold for you, it is too hot or too cold for your pets as well. And if you see something, say something. So those are the three pet related bills that apply to companion animals. But I also wanted to tell you about one bill that I think we often don't think about, but it is something that you might be interested in, because balloon releases can definitely be an exciting visual event. However, they can pose a danger to pets and other animals, the balloon litter. And so they can become a choking hazard for our pets. The wildlife, it's the same threat alongside entanglement for birds. There are sadly plenty of images that we have seen right here in our state of Pennsylvania of wildlife that this has happened to, along with environmental concerns. And so I think luckily for all of us that there are alternatives to balloon releases, planting trees, flying kites. There's definitely alternatives that we can do to commemorate a moment just the same. So I thought it was really exciting. My master's is from Penn State, so I was really proud of them for ending their mass balloon release just recently. And they did replace it with an environmentally seed pack option to honor families. And I was just really PA proud of that. So there is a bill that will be reintroduced this session. So if this is something that's important to you, making sure that you let your state legislators know. And then finally, here's one that I just briefly wanted to touch on, which was Sunday hunting. So they are looking to reintroduce a bill that would allow the Pennsylvania Game Commission to determine how many days of Sunday hunting could occur. So it would give the authority to the agency to make that decision. So it could be every Sunday during hunting season in reality. So I did just want to let you all know, because I think it's important that we have a relationship with our legislators, because they represent the issues that are important to us. And so if this is something that you want to talk with them about, and making sure that, as a hiker, that it's something that is important to you, and making sure that they help advocate for people who want to freely enjoy Pennsylvania's outdoors without worrying about that Sunday. And so it's the one day of the week during hunting season that you all, we all can be out in natural resources. And so, I do think this is one that if this is an issue that is important to you, making sure that you're letting your state representative and state senator know. So I will stop there and see if there are any questions on the legislative side before I hand it to the always amazing Dr. Resnick for pet tips, safety tips. No questions. Okay. Well, at the end, if you have any questions or, you want to know, I did have one slide on there that we can go to that you can find your state representatives, the state senator and state representative who represent you. And, so that's another, oh, no, that's fine, Haley. But at the end, we'll pull my slide back up with resources and we can click on that link if that's helpful for everyone. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's awesome. So much information. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. One person handling all of the tackling all of this in our state. We're thankless. We did have a question pop up from Amy about local leash laws, if you have any information on that.
So yeah, then actually, Dr. Resnick is going to talk a little bit about that. So, on your local laws, it's whoever your town or borough council is. And if that is something that actually I should probably ask too, is that if that's something that you want to have in your community, then you would definitely want to talk with your local elected official. But your municipality ordinance should have information about local leash laws. I may need more content on that actually.
Does that answer your question, Amy?
It does. Oh, hi, Amy. I see you right there. Okay. Amy, go to your local municipality. Your borough council or your township will be able to let you know what that is. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Resnick, we're going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kristen, for all the work you do, all the legislation that's so important, especially to people who love to hike and enjoy the outdoors. And Haley, thanks for inviting me. I obviously love dogs, and I've been hiking in Pennsylvania for my entire life. And even though I live in Philly, I'm a good example of how you can still enjoy the outdoors. Fairmount Park is a huge park within the city. I love the Wissahickon Creek Park, especially that section. And my parents live in the Poconos, so I have spent a long time hiking all over Pennsylvania, and I love it. I'm happy to hear about the Sunday hunting law, because I do worry. I hate having to worry about, I wear a vest, my dogs wear vests, but it still makes me a little nervous. And before I started teaching at a vet school, I was an emergency veterinarian for a long time. I also used to work in public health, so all the diseases that we can share with our dogs, or that we also get. And then probably the longest amount of time I've spent in my 24 years has been a shelter veterinarian. So I am going to hopefully correctly share my screen to give you the presentation. Okay, Haley, is my presentation up?
You're good to go. Great job.
Okay, all right. Let's see. There's my most recent hiking companion. And let's see, I just need to, oh, there we go. Okay, I think, all right. And also thank you to everybody who's listening, because, webinars, sometimes it's hard to listen to people talking online. And I really appreciate that anybody who cares enough to listen to safety tips for taking their dogs hiking, because it's so beneficial to dogs and to us. So before you go, and again, these are things that I've seen all these years, and also my personal experiences. So something to consider is, how much exercise does your dog typically get? Because I've seen a lot of really limping, painful dogs come into the ER because they were so painful because they really didn't exercise very much. Probably everybody here has pretty active dogs, but just take that into consideration. There's human couch to 5Ks. Obviously, a dog is not going to be, even though they want to go and will probably run around with you the entire time, they're not always, it can sometimes be a huge adjustment if they're not exercising frequently. Vaccinations are so important for disease prevention. I'll talk about that more later. Tick prevention, something as basic as just trimming nails, so they don't get caught or tear when you're out on the trail. What breed of dog, the age, the size, does your dog have any medical issues like arthritis? But choosing a collar and harness. Haley, is this advancing okay? The screen sharing's fine? Oh, you're probably muted. Okay. I'm just going to assume so.
Yes, everything's
Okay,
good.
thank you. Sorry, IT. So the collar and harness type, you want something to be safe. So worst case, your dog escapes. You don't want a collar that has a prong collar or a choke collar or a martingale that could got stuck on a branch, they could choke. So you want something that is safe, but also maintains control. I really love harnesses. I use it's a Freedom, I think it's called Freedom harness, where it fits around the chest. The leash can be hooked on the chest or between the shoulder blades or both for even more control. And the leash expands, so it can go from 4 to 6 feet. And 6 feet is usually the length that is required by a lot of laws. You want the harness to be comfortable, so not too tight. And you want it to be humane. So there are lots of different prong collars. And I know having very strong dogs, it can be really hard to walk with them and not have them pull your arm out of the socket to maintain control. And even though your dog will get really excited to go for a walk, those prong collars can really hurt them and they can negatively associate walks with that pain. So I'm a really big fan of harnesses. They're safe for the neck. Even pulling on a choke collar, a dog getting so excited, it can actually harm the trachea, the muscles around the throat. So that's really important. I think as far as the retractable leashes, I doubt anyone hiking would use them. And I know it's nice to be able to let your dog go farther to explore areas like the water and you don't want to get wet. And they do make really long leashes, even if the law is 6 feet, they do make leashes that are a lot longer. So you can safely let your dog roam a bit. But without you, people sometimes get cut by the retractable leashes. They slide between people's knees and actually cause lacerations. And they can snap off, or if the dog gets loose, the heavy holder can chase them and they get scared and they run away from them. For dogs who carry a pack, I've gone on long trips where my dogs had to carry their own food and water. You don't really want it to be more than 20% of their weight. There are a lot of booties that are made, but not every dog will tolerate them. So there's pros and cons to them. They're really great for protecting the paw from lacerations, abrasions, just wearing away that paw pad. But they also make it harder for them to walk. So if you've ever seen your dog, like the way they spread their toes and the traction they have is incredible. So even though it protects them, a lot of dogs really don't like them. And if you do use anything new, certainly try that harness on, walk with them before then so they can acclimatize to it. And so if you notice anything like sometimes dogs get really bad lacerations and abrasions under their armpits from a new harness. And of course, consider the weather. What season is it? Because I don't hunt, my mom will remind me about when hunting season is and to be aware of that, to make sure that my dog's brown, she doesn't stand out, to put a collar on her, to be aware of that, the high and low temperatures, the time of day. So if it's really hot and humid, of course, early morning is best, and the duration of the hike. Something I see so often in shelters and in my neighborhood, everywhere, lost dogs. Microchips are the best way. Collars can slip off, the name tags can get worn away. Having a microchip is the best way to be able, if your dog does get loose, so someone can track you down. And some dogs have microchips, and sometimes I'm really excited. They scan positive for a microchip, but then it turns out that the information is not up to date. It'll maybe just say where they were, that a shelter implanted it or a vet hospital, but not have the up-to-date information. And it's also great to have an ID on the collar, because even I don't ever carry a microchip scanner around with me. But having that ID on the collar is really helpful, because if you find a dog when you're hiking and you can say, wow, this dog came from quite a distance away, versus finding a local dog. So having that ID is really important. And before you go, even I do this because I definitely cannot treat all of the things. If my dog breaks a leg, I will need a vet who can fix that. I cannot. So I always look up the closest ER vet to where I'm going, and also their hours. There are some ERs that are not open 24/7 anymore because there's also a vet shortage. And so it's really important to see where are they, so that you're not frantically Googling when your animal's injured. So, and of course, you're all sure avid hikers, so you know about different trails do they permit dogs? Sometimes dogs are restricted to certain areas, sometimes dogs aren't allowed at all. Just being aware of that. And knowing what's normal for your dog. So I don't expect you to be taking their temperatures, but it is quite a bit higher than ours. So sometimes that worries people. I listed the normal heart rate. If you're worried about your dog, the heart rate can go up obviously with exercise, but also with pain or with injury or like internal injuries. And so you can usually just slide your fingers under their thigh and feel that really strong femoral pulse. Something that's really helpful to know is the gum color. So gum should be pink. And when you press on it with your finger, it's turn white for a second or two and then go right back to being pink. And that's capillary refill time. And that tells you how good their perfusion is. Do they have enough, tells you if they're anemic or if they have some sort of problem. And it can be tricky when dogs have black pigmented gums, but you can also just look at the tongue to make sure it's pink. Knowing the difference between panting and respiratory distress. Panting's just, everyone's seen their dog pant, but with respiratory distress, usually their elbows will be away from their body, their neck will be extended, and they'll be obviously struggling using their abdomen to breathe. No anything new or chronic medical issues. What lumps and bumps are normal for your pet? I have seen several emergency visits for, I can't get this tick off my dog, but they were just growths that were on the dog. And some of them really did look like ticks, but just knowing what's there already so that you're not worried that, oh, we might have gotten injured while hiking, but actually that was like a lipoma, that little fatty growth that was always on your dog. And taking into consideration the age of your pet, very young when their growth plates aren't closed. I made the mistake once of hiking with a very, very young puppy who overexerted herself. And then older dogs can have arthritis. So what to pack? A lot of the things that you might pack in your first aid kit are things that you can use for your dog. The difference is Band-Aids don't really stick. So I'm not saying that everyone needs to pack all the worst case scenario type of equipment, but if you have any sort of, just anything you can get at a drugstore, like gauze or like that kind of any sort of bandaging material. I'm a huge fan of liquid bandage. I use it on so many animals. Say that there's a really bad abrasion to the paw pad, that's not even something that you can sew. So liquid bandage really applies like a really protective coat that's waterproof and is really great to use. Not on the haired areas, obviously, but it's really helpful for paw pad injuries. Any kind of antibiotic ointment or Vaseline in case of a wound. And for allergic reactions, I think Benadryl is really safe. The drug is diphenhydramine. The dose is the weight of your dog. So it's really easy. It comes in 25 milligrams. If your dog's 25 pounds, he gets 1 tablet. A 100-pound dog gets 4. So 100 pounds, 100 milligrams. You want to make sure it's the only ingredient. Sometimes they sell Benadryl, cold and cough, whatever, but just make sure that's it. Baking soda is nice. I mean, again, I don't carry all this stuff, but it's something that you can also use if nails are cut to stop the bleeding. I do love dog nail clippers. I use them for obviously trimming nails, but also they're the really big ones are really strong. They can cut metal. They're nice to have for some things. Tweezers, flea combs, I like. They sell little tiny plastic ones. They're really nice for getting burrs off your dog. And a muzzle. And you might think, well, my dog would never bite me. I can't tell you how many people have come to the ER and they're bleeding too. When a dog is painful and injured, they are not thinking about who the owner is, how much they love them. They are just reacting out of fear and pain. And they sell, you can buy cheap little nylon ones that aren't heavy that you could add to a pack and they can keep you safe. Drinking water, it's nice to have. You never know what's brewing in that water. So having some drinking water or whatever filter you might use. Lots of poop bags. Towels are great, not just for drying your dog, but also to use as a sling. Air horns can be good for a couple reasons. Once in a while, break up a dog fight, but mostly just to warn if you wanted to scare off wildlife. And extra food. Sometimes if you're like me, you get lost, and sometimes your hikes end up being way longer than you plan. The recommendation is for long hikes for dogs to increase calorie intake by about 50%. Vaccinations are really important. Rabies is very important. There's plenty of rabies vectors when we hike, like raccoons, skunk, groundhogs, bats. There was even a couple weeks ago, somewhere I hike often in Jim Thorpe, there was even a rabid bear, which is pretty rare. So it's really important for your dogs to be vaccinated. There are legal requirements because even though it's really rare for people in the US to get rabies, it's really likely that you're going to die from it. And same with your pet. So keeping your dog vaccinated against rabies is really important in case they get bit by anything like a raccoon. It's also important for if your dog got into an altercation with another dog or a human and bit somebody, it's required that dog be vaccinated. And if your dog does get bit by wildlife or another dog that can't be monitored, you can just go to your vet for a rabies booster. The second vaccine is leptospirosis. Your vets will usually give that in combination with the distemper vaccine. Unlike the distemper vaccine, which most vets give every 3 years, the vaccine protects against the bacteria and it's only good for a year. So it does need a yearly booster. It's spread through the urine of infected wildlife like raccoons and rats. And the urine from infected animals can contaminate soil and water, especially after rain and flooding. And it can enter the body through lapping up the water, broken skin, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and can cause kidney failure. Lyme disease, which is spread by ticks, is another yearly vaccine. That's great. There's not one currently for humans, but it's really nice that our dogs can be protected from Lyme disease, which is so endemic in Pennsylvania. And distemper is just the core vaccine you'll get every few years. There's nothing about hiking, especially unless your dog is the important thing is if your dog is very young and is not younger than 3 to 4 months, and is new to hiking, and there are dogs or other puppies who have something like parvovirus, they can catch that pretty easily. So it's really important that they're up to date on vaccines. Kennel cough, again, not very likely on a hike unless your dogs are meeting a lot of other dogs. And it's important to make sure that those vaccines are timed so that if the first time your dog's getting a lepto or a Lyme vaccine, it requires the first vaccine, a booster in 3 to 4 weeks. And so it's not protective for maybe 6 weeks after the vaccine was first given. I always wish that I could put tick and flea prevention on my back before I went out. I love that my dogs are protected from ticks by using either something oral like Bravecto, where it lasts for 3 months. It's an oral tablet, no gunk on the fur, that prevents ticks. There's the frontline topicals. There's so many products. I have seen so many new products over the last 20 plus years, and they're really great. And I really do wish, I mean, I use spray on myself, but I wish I had something that I could take or apply once a month or every 3 months to ward off those ticks. I'm sure you all know Pennsylvania is full of Lyme disease. That's the most common tick-borne disease and can be vaccinated against. So ticks can also transmit anaplasma, Ehrlichia, Babesia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. I was just talking to one of my ER colleagues at the school, and she was saying how she is just seeing more every year, just more and more tick-borne disease. So they might be positive for Lyme, but they're also positive for Ehrlichia. And as weather changes, there are more ticks. Again, I always think prevent the preventable. We can prevent tick-borne illness in our dogs by vaccinating and tick prevention. And it's also nice that they also ward off fleas. So again, not much for hiking, but just being around other dogs, sometimes the area can be infested with fleas. And fleas are also a source of tapeworm when dogs swallow the flea. Getting there. It's working for a shelter with an animal control component. We see lots of dogs who get loose, and it is easier to catch a dog when they have a leash on. So I recommend keeping them on in the car. And there's not one study that shows what's the safest way to transport your dog. It depends on your car, the dog, what works for you. There are seatbelt harnesses one of my friends use. Sometimes I put my dog in a crate in the back. There are safety gates. And it's also important to consider what's safe for you to drive. There was a case sometime in the last few years where a woman was driving and her dogs were just rambunctious or whatever, playing in the car and actually ran her off the road. So I always, even though I want my dog to be near me, I sometimes I think of that, and I'm really careful about making sure that they are away from me while I'm driving. Hiking etiquette, leashes. I know how fun and it is for dogs to run loose and how beautiful it is to see them frolicking, but it is important to follow those rules because some people are, it's hard to imagine because we love dogs so much, but some people are really afraid of dogs. And when you see even like the biggest, like this happy dog who loves people bounding towards them, it can be terrifying. And a lot of dogs are afraid of people. Not every dog wants somebody to come up and pet them. Sometimes people will ask me, can I pet your dog? And I say, oh, she's a little bit afraid of people. And a lot of times I'll just be somewhere and they'll say to me or my kids, oh, do you want to pet my dog? And I see that dog and his ears are back, and it's a slow drop tail wag, and eyes are to the side, sometimes lip licking. And I can tell that, I don't know if sometimes your dog's trying to tell you that they don't want everybody to come say hi, and that's okay. And of course, pick up and carry out that dog poop. It's infuriating when I see dog poop bags on a trail. It's like, it doesn't help bagging it up. There's a risk to wildlife. There are different parasites that can alter the ecosystem when dogs spread them to wildlife. They can contaminate water sources. And who wants to step in dog poop when you're on a beautiful trail? I have to deal with dog poop all the time. I hate when I'm on a trail and it gets ruined. And also, when people are irresponsible, it gives dog owners a bad name. So one of my friends is an avid birder. She brings her dog with her, and people complain about dog poop and dog poop bags on trails. And then those people are really vocal about talking to their legislators and getting dogs banned from trails, which I don't want to see. So I sometimes will hand someone a bag, or I'll point out that their dog pooped. I sometimes I get screamed at sometimes. And I'll tell them, like, I love dogs. I care about the environment. I don't want anyone to get hurt, but so I try to be gentle. My sister has a very fearful dog. The collar warns people, I need space. Not every dog wants to say hi to other dogs. And a lot of people do this on trails to me. Um, if my dog is leash, even if that dog is very social with other dogs, a leash dog being approached by an unleashed dog is a huge threat. And that dog can get very scared. And so saying, oh, my dog's friendly, don't worry about it, it's not okay. And it's really difficult to manage that when your dog is reacting to an unleashed dog. And breed bias. You shouldn't assume that every lab is really social. You shouldn't assume every pit bull is going to be dog aggressive. It really depends on the dog and what they're used to, how they were socialized. Unfortunately, this has happened to me. I hope it hasn't happened to any of you. Sorry, I just need to charge my computer. That you can when dogs do get in a fight, and it's really awful and stressful. Most of the time it's just a scuffle, but you also have to keep yourself safe. So when it's appropriate and safe, you can distract them with your air horn. Sometimes dousing them with water, any kind of physical barrier like a backpack. And worst case, as long as the teeth aren't embedded in the other dog's neck, both people can pick up the hind legs and walk backwards, because that way they'll be off balance and they won't be able to continue like lunging. So hopefully that will never happen. I'm going to talk about some of the risks. So ticks. Different diseases can take from a few hours to 48 hours after attachment to spread. So that's why it's so important to remove them. And this all applies to you too. So back when I was a public health veterinarian, I talked about the concept of One Health, which is the interconnectedness of humans, animals, and our environment. So one of my favorite stories was a case of a human who was very sick and was hospitalized. And she had a case that was hard to diagnose. And long story short, they figured it out because her dogs had been to the ER for Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which you can even see in Pennsylvania. So when the dogs, they realized that the human had the tick-borne disease because her dogs became ill. So tick removal goes for you too. They're mostly found around the head, ears, neck, and feet. You can remove them they sell tick removers. I just use my fingernails. Some people get really squeamish about touching them. I just pinch them off as close as I can to the dog's fur and skin. You can use tweezers. You want to pull up using steady pressure without twisting. And if the head can't be removed, the skin will heal. Sometimes they'll have a scab or swelling for days after removal, but you don't have to go crazy trying to remove that head. I have seen ER cases where someone caused such a bad infection by really trying to dig out that head. The tick will die when you remove the body. And I've even seen some people burn the tick off dog while the tick was still attached. So it's okay. Get the tick off as best you can. And especially if they're on a tick prevention, the tick's going to be affected anyway. It's going to start to die. And with tick diseases, you can sometimes see diseases, they might not show symptoms for days to weeks later. Paw and nail injuries are pretty common with hiking. Sometimes it's good to just check your dog's feet once in a while. Sometimes they can, depending on the surface, they can really rub their paw pads raw. And so you want to check for abrasions. If it's too hot, they can burn their paw pads. There can be little lacerations. Toenails can get stuck if they're overgrown, or even if they're not overgrown. Burrs, when my dog gets burrs on her paws, she acts like she is paralyzed. She will not move. They're nice to remove with some the flea comb. If there's holes in the ground, dogs can fracture their legs, and fish hooks, unfortunately. And those can be, sometimes I've even removed those with my big nail clippers, just cutting out,
Yes.
and pushing them back. Um,
No, I'm here. I'm listening to a webinar.
some of the common parasites from hiking will be Giardia. The dogs can ingest the cyst from ponds, streams, soil, or feces, and you can see diarrhea and vomiting. You can prevent that by bringing your own water. I'm not going to say that my dog has never licked at a stream or pond, but I try. And a lot of dogs, it's not uncommon to see diarrhea from Giardia. It's pretty common. And then all the other parasites, hookworms, roundworms, whipworms, they get them from contaminated soil. Most heartworm products also have ivermectin in them, or most of them have a component of it that also treats is an intestinal parasite preventive. Insect bites are pretty common. So usually they'll just get swelling or redness, but sometimes you'll see the whole face get swollen. Worst case, they can have an anaphylactic reaction where the soft tissue in the throat gets swollen. And brachycephalic dogs, so those bulldogs, Frenchies, pugs, they have more tissue in the back of their throat that can swell and cause breathing difficulty, so they can be pretty severe. You can apply a paste of baking soda and water or a cool compress. You can go ahead and give that Benadryl. It's a really safe medication that shouldn't interfere with anything that the veterinarian would do later on. I'm sure you're all familiar with the wildlife of Pennsylvania. I love seeing them, but we don't want our dogs to bother them and chase them. Even though my dog's on a long leash, before I even notice, she will get half her body down a groundhog barrow, and I have to pull her out and apologize to the groundhog. And some dogs get pretty bad bites from those groundhogs, so you don't want them to get bit, catch anything. I've seen more than I wanted of dogs getting sprayed by skunks. They can actually, if they're sprayed in the face, they can actually get some corneal ulceration. So you can rinse their eyes out. Baking soda, soap, and hydrogen peroxide is the best way to wash them. Let that soak and rinse it off. You don't need tomato juice. Porcupine quills are definitely something that needs to be seen by a veterinarian as soon as possible. Those quills can migrate all over the body. And snake bites, not something you can prevent, but something that would need to be seen by a vet. There's not a ton of snake bites in Pennsylvania. It's pretty safe compared to my friends in Arizona, but another reason, just keep your pet leashed. I have seen several stick impalements. My dogs love their sticks, but they can sometimes, if they're running around with one in their mouth, I had a case where a dog impaled the stick right on his trachea and came into the ER with trouble breathing. If something gets lodged into your pet's side or something, you can cut it shorter, but just try not to remove it all the way. Don't assume there's a minor wound. Sometimes it's a lot deeper, or sometimes pieces can break off and cause a foreign body and migrate into the muscle and cause an infection later on. Sometimes an x-ray can show it. I mentioned fish hooks. Traps. I was hiking recently and somebody yelled out, "I hope your dog's in a leash," because I have coyote traps. There's not really any way to treat that other than just be aware, but we see those kinds of injuries. Wounds happen a lot on a trail. I've had several minor lacerations. Do the best you can. Rinse them off. You can put some ointment on them. You can leave them open, but if you want to cover them, you can put a sock, bandage material, anything. Again, muzzling or wrapping tightly in a towel can protect you. If something's bleeding badly, you can apply pressure and a bandage, but you just want to leave that on. Any eye injuries, you can just flush with water. And that towel come in handy anytime, helping them walk if need be. Dehydration, even though you'll probably, I'm sure you'll pack enough water, you can check by lifting that gum up again. You can check if it's pink, but also when you touch the gum, it should be pretty moist. If the saliva is thick and ropey, that's another sign of dehydration. And you can also pinch their skin to see if it returns to the position quickly. Heat stroke is something that I have seen a lot. It's easy to underestimate how hot it is. Dogs cool by convection when they pant. So if it's hot and it's humid, and even if it's not even that hot, dogs can really struggle, especially those brachycephalic breeds. And I've seen dogs come into the ER with temperatures of 105 and higher. Dogs can even get hot in an air-conditioned moving car. My own dog had heat stress, I'll say. I was driving with my lab. It was the summer. The air was on. He was in the back seat. Sometimes the air condition doesn't reach those way back trunks. And he began having vomiting and diarrhea, lethargy. His temperature was really high. And I couldn't believe that. Driving in a car, the sun was out. It was a really hot day, but even in a car while it's driving with air conditioning, they can get overheated, especially if you don't have air conditioned vents going to the back and it's sunny out. You'll see them sometimes just not be able to settle. They'll pant a lot. And you can cool them down with water and getting them into the shade. It's dogs eat things before we can grab them. So most plants cause vomiting and nausea and diarrhea. Some can cause oral ulceration. Same with us, like there's toxic mushrooms that we don't want them to eat. Animal carcasses, my dogs have rolled in them. They've tried to eat them. They can get bacteria and have pretty bad vomiting and diarrhea from that, parasites and secondary poisoning if that animal died from rodenticide. And my own dog, again, fractured her teeth on sticks. So they're really fun, but it can cause some damage. And then once you get home, check for ticks. The sooner you get them off, the better. And when you're doing your own tick checks, you can check your dog. And I'm not going to say everyone's going to bathe their dog after every single hike, but it is nice to remove even some of the parasites that are spread through the feces of other dogs or wildlife. Removing them off the coat can really reduce the risk of them getting of ingesting those parasites when they're licking their fur. Even though dogs don't typically get poison ivy, because of their fur, they can carry that oil on their fur and give it to you. And of course, the benefits are so many. Happy dogs, exercise for both of us. The environmental enrichment that dogs get, their sense of smell is so strong, and for them to be in a new environment is so great for their mental health. We can all enjoy the outdoors, and even though I love to get in a really good hike, lots of exercise, I take times out of my hike to do sniff walks. So whether it's a short hike or a long hike, I give my dogs time to just smell everything. And I see some people really impatient. They're trying to get their workout in and they'll yank their dog's collar. And sometimes you just want to get going and you want to walk, but it's really important for that dog. They love to stop and smell everything. It's really good for them. If you need a hiking buddy, I had labs for 20 years who are like classic hikers. And then I started bringing pitties home from my shelter, and they are great hiking buddies too. And there are programs at local shelters where you can take dogs out for a day trip. So staff will select certain dogs who really need some exercise, who are really socialized, And even that one day out from the stress of the shelter can really make a difference in their mental health and happiness. It's really rewarding for you. And this, the dog below, one of my friends is a volunteer at a shelter, and she took this dog just out for a day trip. And when she was adopted, the adopter said, "What caught my attention was all the pictures were the pictures you took showing me how much she enjoyed being outside and was such a great companion on a hike." Um, and just a few resources. Veterinarypartner.com is such a great resource. Before you Google, see if they have what you're searching for. It's written by veterinarians, and there's really good, reliable, free information. Um, the Red Cross has some information. They have a course on cat and dog first aid, and a lot of your vet hospitals and ERs will also offer courses. And the ASPCA has a website to list all the different plants that are harmful. And hopefully I left enough time. Thank you for listening. Let's see.
Thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and you think that you're doing all the right things, but a lot to learn. I'm gonna ask you some of the questions that came in through the chat. But if anyone does have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself or go ahead and drop it in the chat. Okay, so I do see one. Instead of poop bags, are dogs allowed to poop on the trail? So we're going to take the stance of leave no trace, which is always carry out. We are a partner of Leave No Trace, a community partner and an organizational partner. And just with any sort of disease spread or potential contaminants, our stance is to carry out. Let's see what else.
And they do make bags that they make like charcoal line, different kind of bags that help with the smell, because I know it's not pleasant carrying.
Yeah. And those poop bags that you have come in handy for other things. So having that in your day pack, you never know what you may need to pick up or to have. So I think all of us on the call can say we've gotten pretty creative with how to carry those poop bags or maybe use them more than once. Cassie, good to hear from you. She asks, what should you look for in a sling?
In a sling?
Yes.
But even that's why I just say carry a towel, even because as long as you can put the weight, you put the towel as close as you can to the back legs and help lift them up. There are really great slings out there. There's a lot of different products, but really just anything that can help you lift the dog's weight, help take some of the weight off of them, if that's
Yes. Someone else said about re-hunting, recommending the blazed orange vest. Thanks, Jack. We will definitely show you some options for that in a second. But yes, it is difficult in Pennsylvania, and I know that something that we've talked about is being able to communicate the hunting season effectively, especially with all of the changes that are happening to the hunting schedule, not only to Pennsylvania residents, but to visitors coming into the state. Having that orange just on you in the fall and winter is safe, especially for your pet that could be I have a lab chow. He looks like a giant black bear. So yeah, it is of a concern to me, and I definitely keep him with the blazed orange. And I was thinking when you were saying, Dr. Resnick, about he has a purple, black tongue and gums. And I'm like, oh no, I need to definitely recognize what normal is. But when you do like for the pink gums, what's like the first step that you should do if you notice that they don't return back to pink quickly? Like what should be your first step?
there will be other signs. So let's say they had a really bad injury or some sort of internal injury you can't see, or even this even happened to a friend of mine who a dog had a splenic tumor that ruptured during a hike, and all of a sudden the dog became really weak. And she's not a vet, and she noticed that the gums were really pale. that the pulses were really fast and she knew it was something serious. So you will see other signs. It's just a way to to get a better idea of what's going on. So,
Or I
um,
guess, what should we do if we notice, oh, the gums do seem really, really pale? Is it like try to get them to drink or?
it's really just like see if you can find any source of the problem.
Okay.
And if not, just take them to a vet because there's so many things. Like I even thought about talking about CPR but it's like when you're out on a trail, even if you're not that far from a vet, it's not like there's a lot of human things that you can like AFib where you can fix in human to get them to the hospital. But with dog CPR, it's hard to do a lot of things that will actually sustain them until you get there. If it's something that's that bad, it's hard to manage. And so I don't want anyone to look at their dog's gums and say, oh, they look pale. If the dog's acting fine, like don't even look. Because I've even looked at my had days where my dog seemed quiet and I looked at the gums. It's a very subjective thing. So it's just an idea, it's just a guide for telling what their perfusion is. Is their blood pumping enough red blood cells throughout their body? So
I guess, yeah. Any other questions out in the webinar world here? We have two experts, so don't hold back.
Haley, I think that just one thing to mention if when everybody's out and about, there is a link that is on the last slide in that presentation um, to report animal cruelty and neglect. So even if you're not at, even if it's not something you come across on your hikes, I mean, this could be just something that you see in your day-to-day life. Where to report animal cruelty is to your local humane police officer. And so there is a link that I can drop in the chat. And if you are a county without a Humane Society police officer, you would contact local or state police. They are just they also enforce the animal cruelty statute. So I'll pop that in the
Thank
chat.
I did drop those earlier, but yes, if you
Oh,
wanted to
perfect.
now that
Oh,
it's relevant,
nope, you're good. You did. Oh, you did. You're so good. See,
I
you're
put in how to find your local legislator and then the resource as to report cruelty. And I think just to reiterate, I live in a really small rural town, and the more often that you report it, even if you did report it, encourage others to report it and just keep reporting. And hopefully it'll get something done. We did get another question. Um, how old would you recommend a puppy before longer hikes? Oh, and that reminds me, there was Amy asked another question earlier about what age are growth plates set? I
depends on
guess
the breed. So the bigger breeds, like the Great Danes, it can be up to a couple years, usually like 9 to 12 months. So, and it depends on how big the dog is and how acclimated they are to long hikes. So you kind of just have to see what your dog can do, how long it takes them to recover afterwards. Some people want to rush into really strenuous long hikes when the dogs are very young, and we don't want anyone to harm their dog. So um, yeah. So about 1 year, but up to 2 in the larger breeds.
okay. I'll take this one. Any suggestions for dog-friendly trails in Pennsylvania, including suggestions for tenting, hammocking? So what I'm going to suggest is to definitely do your research and to check out how busy the trail is, especially with the dog that you have. Um, I think it's really important to try to find one that isn't super overused. Like, I wouldn't suggest Ricketts Glen with a dog, just for example, with the amount of traffic, and the amount of steps and passing people. And something to consider if you're thinking of doing a trail that has a shelter system in place, like the Laurel Highlands Trail or something like that. oftentimes a reservation is required, so you would just want to check and make sure most of the time they are pet friendly. Um, but if you like so you want to check about that, but also if you're along the Appalachian Trail, like you definitely would have to consider some folks might not be open to you bringing your dog in. So just always being prepared and planning ahead as much as possible is my suggestion. And actually for the dog trail suggestions, we're getting ready to poll our audience, our members on suggestions for dog friendly hikes, which was going to lead me into I have two slides really quickly to show you guys. Um, but so hopefully we'll have some suggestions here shortly on dog friendly hikes that we would suggest. So really quickly, I'm going to share my screen. Any experiencing with hammocking, how we can make our dogs comfortable. Ooh, and that leads me to the tenting suggestion too. So we took, my dog was like 2, and I thought, ooh, he's gonna love camping with us. He was so freaked out by the tent, and it took a lot of persuading to get him to come into the tent. And I was like, oh, we should have definitely like set this up in the backyard and left it open for him to explore and get comfortable because I mean, he like kind of freaked out when we first took him in. So I would definitely suggest like practicing and doing things. But I'll actually open it up to Dr. Resnick to answer about the experiencing with hammocking because that's way beyond anything that I would be comfortable doing. But I would say just with
mean,
confidence.
what what do they mean about
So
hammock?
like I think if you were to be on like a long distance trail or to set up a hammock instead of a tent to sleep in and getting your dog
Oh,
to
okay.
come in with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about acclimation. My dog loves being in being in a hammock. She'll lie on her back with her feet up. It's hilarious. I had another dog who was terrified of the movement because it move. They are not like stable, though they move. I think getting your dog used to everything is so helpful. Like, right, like some of my dogs look like didn't even need acclimating to a tent, but some are afraid or try to bust out. So I think it's everything. The harness, the collar, the tent, the hammock, everything you do, getting them used to it is so much better. And sometimes you just don't think of it till you're already out there. Sometimes a dog will just be so afraid of something that just don't think they'll be afraid of. But yeah, acclimating is a great idea.
Um, I just want to be very cognizant that you'll start hearing my cats meowing in the background because it's past 7 p.m. and they're officially starving. So I apologize for their
Some people
chatter.
take I thought about dropping in some cat photos. Some people do take their cats um, on the little backpacks and with them. Some cats like it, and there's some stories I'm sure you've seen online of like these amazing cat stories who hike with their owners, but most
Yes,
cats.
that is a good question, like encountering that, because you definitely see like I think too, it's important to, so I'm going to point to a partner that we have this spring, and she talks about how healthy it is for her to have a dog because it gets her outside, um, and the importance of exercising him and exercising herself. That's such a beautiful thing. So I'm glad that Dr. Resnick really touched on that, and it could mean the difference of a shelter dog getting adopted by you taking the time to get it out. So I think we're all like super passionate about that. Um, so this webinar is so exciting, and we will be able to, I've recorded it, so we'll share to participants that signed up as well to our network. I'll share both with Dr. Resnick and to Kristen. But it precedes our spring hiking weekend. So this spring, Keystone Trails Association is hosting our 2025 spring hiking weekend at the Lake Raystown region. And I'm so excited. This is our first dog-friendly weekend. So each day we have at least one program that your dog is welcome. So we wanted to do a webinar about safely hiking with your pet. And also set up the safe parameters as to, some dogs just need the space. And so this webinar we're definitely going to send out to the folks who are registering to bring their dog. On Friday, which is the first day, April 25th, we have both Tiffany and Freck, who are influencers, content creators, if you will, in Pennsylvania, and they are our co-hosts for the Dog Lovers Hike on the Terrace Mountain Trail for spring hiking weekend. Tiffany has been so awesome to work with. She's such a beautiful soul, and I'm so excited to meet Freck. There are still a few spots open available on that hike. So I hope you're able to join us, and we're so excited to be able to offer this opportunity. I also wanted to share, this is my dog on the Chow, the purple tongue. We started this year making some blazed orange dog bandanas that support our mission, the Hiking Buddy. So they are available on the KTA storefront for purchase if you're interested. And Moo is in the upper right hand corner. Um, he's also in his blazed orange bandana as well. But anything works. You don't have to have anything fancy, just as long as they're in that blazed orange color. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to see if there are any questions in the chat. But yeah, this has been such a fun webinar to plan. And I thank you both so much. Does anybody else have any questions before we say goodnight? And I apologize for my cold. Awesome. Well,
Thank you
thank you
so
all
much
so
for
much. Yeah.
this,
Oh, yeah.
Haley. Thank you for the opportunity. Really, this was wonderful.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Enjoy. I can't wait till spring.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.